Donkey Kong Country 3, Dixie Kong's Double Trouble, is the third entry in the Donkey Kong Country series and the final game in the original trilogy. Just as with the first two games in the series, Dixie Kong's Double Trouble is a 2D platform-style game developed by Rare and published by Nintendo. It was released on the Super Nintendo Entertainment System in November of 1996 for America and Japan, and December of the same year for Europe and Australia. You may have noticed based on those release dates, and yes, Donkey Kong Country 3 did in fact release after the N64. You might think that it wasn't the best idea to release a game for a console that was, for all intents and purposes, obsolete, but in reality the fact that the SNES was no longer Nintendo's newest console didn't seem to have any major effect on Donkey Kong Country 3's sales or reception. In fact, I'd say that the game actually managed to thrive in these less than ideal circumstances, as it sold 3.5 million copies worldwide, becoming the 11th best-selling SNES game of all time, and garnered generally positive reactions from critics and fans alike. Those are some major accomplishments for a game that was the third in a series and released on outdated hardware, which made me very excited to check this one out. Did it live up to its reputation? Well, let's jump into the review of Donkey Kong Country 3 and find out. First off, I should mention that I'm playing on the Nintendo Switch Online version of the game. I don't believe there are any major differences between the versions, if any at all, but I figured I should let you guys know just in case. But anyway, let's talk about what we see when we boot up the game. As usual, the first thing to pop up on the screen is the Rareware logo, but unlike the previous two entries in the series that featured a very simple logo that formed out of a 3D wire frame, Donkey Kong Country 3 has the logo bounce in fully animated with the main characters of DKC3, Dixie Kong, and Kiddy Kong riding on top. It's a definite step up from what we saw in previous games, and in my opinion shows just how familiar Rare had become with the process of turning pre-rendered 3D models into 2D sprites for the Donkey Kong Country games. Even further reinforcing this fact is the Nintendo Presents scene, which has been turned from a simple 3D logo to a fully animated music box of sorts that is spun by Dixie and Kiddy. The music box honestly looks like it's just a full 3D model to me, but I'm assuming it was just a clever trick by Rare's animators. Either way, it's still really cool and a lot more than we got in previous games. This might sound a little weird, but in my opinion, this simple sequence of logo introductions sums up quite well what makes Rareware such a legendary development studio. Even something as basic as displaying the company logos is so much fun to watch that you can't help but get excited to play the game. I mean, if they'd go this far for just some logos, imagine what they would do for the game, right? I've played a lot of Rare games in my life, everything from Diddy Kong Racing to Viva Pinata, and in my opinion one of the biggest things that makes Rareware games so special is their ability to cram so much charm and uniqueness into every corner of a game, and that is nowhere more evident than right here in the logo introduction sequence to Donkey Kong Country 3. But following the logos, we find ourselves at the classic Donkey Kong Country title screen, which shows the subtitle of this entry in the series, Dixie Kong's Double Trouble, as well as a very nice pre-rendered action shot of Dixie and Kiddy riding down a river. Personally, while I do think the image is very vibrant and fun, I would have liked a bit more movement if possible. If I remember correctly, Donkey Kong Country 2's title screen had Diddy Kong looking inside a treasure chest, and the treasure inside that chest was sparkling. It's not a lot of movement by any means, but it's enough to make the title screen look like something more than just a still image. Sure, you'll only see it for a few seconds before you load up the game, but the same can be said for the logos. Even something as simple as a shining sun in the background or some splashing water would have made all the difference in my opinion, but I guess that is kind of nitpicky. I like the title screen a lot. It looks really fun and it's better than many I've seen in the past, but it was just missing one thing to put it over the top and make it truly great. And following the title screen, we of course have the file select screen. In this case, Rare went with a VCR theme, which definitely dates this game. If you weren't convinced it was made in the 90s, now you are. The file select screen, in contrast to the title screen, does have a good deal of movement as well. The timer on the right is constantly blinking seconds, and when you select a file, the VHS tape corresponding to that file is inserted into the VCR in true retro 90s fashion. It's once again very charming and brings back some great memories I have of loading up the VCR with my favorite videotapes as a kid. But anyway, I think that's enough about the intro stuff, let's talk about the actual game. The story of the game, according to the US manual, yes I read the manual, picks up a few months after DKC2, with Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong going on an adventure to the Northern Hemisphere. Diddy leaves Dixie a note saying he'll be back the following day, but he never returns, not even the next day or the next. Eventually, Dixie Kong gets worried about the two and sets off to find out what happened. She bumps into Funky Kong in the Northern Hemisphere, who points out that Kitty Kong, Dixie's cousin, is also here to visit. He suggests taking Kitty Kong along on the quest to find Donkey and Diddy, saying his strength will come in handy. Dixie agrees, and the two are off on a new adventure. It's a classic motivator-based story framework that gives us a reason for doing what we're doing without getting in the way of gameplay. However, you would have no idea what's going on here if you just started playing the game without first reading the manual. This is a problem for us future people specifically because it's not guaranteed that re-releases of the game would come with a manual. I believe you could access the manual digitally on the Wii and Wii U virtual consoles, but on the Nintendo Switch Online service there is no such feature. Also, if you buy a used copy online, it's much more rare to find one with a manual, so in my opinion, this wasn't the greatest decision by Rare and Nintendo. Luckily, you can find pretty much any retro game manual online with a simple Google search, but I'm probably the only person in the world who actually looks up the manual before playing a game on the Nintendo Switch Online service, so still not the most ideal situation. It's a fun story, so why not include it in the game? Your first instinct might be cartridge limitations, but I find it hard to believe a simple scrolling block of text would take up that much space. They didn't have to go overboard and fully animate an intro cutscene or anything like that, although that would have been super cool. I just wanted at least a little bit of explanation about the story within the game. I felt like I didn't get on the other Donkey Kong Country games enough about this manual-based story structure when I did those reviews, so I talked about it here, but it's really not that huge of an issue. We all know the main draw for any Donkey Kong Country game isn't the story, it's the gameplay, so even without much story in the main game, we can still have a great time. Speaking of the gameplay, let's talk about how things work in Donkey Kong Country 3. First things first, let's talk about level structure. Donkey Kong Country 3 is split up into 8 worlds across the Northern Hemisphere, with a total of 48 levels between them. Unlike the previous 2 Donkey Kong Country games, the overworld here is non-linear for the most part. You have the freedom to go anywhere and do anything you like, as long as you have the right vehicle to get there. That's where Funky Kong comes into play. In this installment of the series, Funky has taken up the job of mechanic and provides Dixie and Kitty with a variety of vehicles able to traverse different terrain. For example, you start off with a simple motorboat, but once you progress a bit, Funky gives you a hovercraft able to get over the many rocks that your motorboat could not. It's in this way that you unlock the different worlds that were once out of your reach. I personally very much enjoyed this less linear style of doing things, as it made me feel like I was actually traveling to different areas of the world rather than just walking down a straight line that was set out for me by the developers. It's a style that Rare would adopt for later games like Banjo-Kazooie and Diddy Kong Racing, and I think they made the right choice there. The one complaint I have about all this, though, is that the vehicles can be a bit hard to control. The controls feel very slippery, almost like you are constantly moving over ice. I get that DKC is a very slippery game, but this just makes it annoying to select a world. But once we do actually manage to select the world, we enter a smaller, more linear area where the game takes on a more classic Donkey Kong Country feel. There are some non-linear aspects to these areas, but for the most part you just move from one level to the next along a linear path culminating in a boss fight. Now, let me start off by saying I absolutely love the way the backgrounds of these areas look. They're all so vibrant, and I love the very natural feel of them. However, they're all pretty much the same. There's a forest with a lake, a volcano with a lake, a waterfall with a lake, a castle with a lake, a mountain with a lake, a forest with a river, a snowy peak with a river. What is this obsession with bodies of water? I get they wanted you to be able to swim to kind of delineate the areas a bit, but you could have done that in more ways than just one. Maybe add some areas where you could fly or ski or use a vehicle. I don't know, I'm just spitballing here. Just anything other than have every area centered around a lake. It made the worlds feel very samey even if the levels were quite varied from one another. But before we go any further, let's talk about how the game actually plays. If you're familiar with the other 2 games in the Donkey Kong Country series, you probably have a good idea of what's going on here. Like I said earlier, the 2 main characters of Donkey Kong Country 3 are Dixie Kong and Kitty Kong. You play as one Kong while the other follows you around like a ghost, but you can switch at any time. When one Kong takes a hit, they run away and you're left with whoever you had in reserve at the time. But don't worry, you can get them back at any time by simply finding and breaking a DK barrel. The 2 Kong cousins have different abilities, meaning you'll need to swap between the 2 when the situation calls for it. However, and that's a big fat however, 99% of the time it's better to play as Dixie in my opinion. Dixie has the ability to slow her descent by spinning her hair like a helicopter, the same way she did in Donkey Kong Country 2. On the other hand, Kitty Kong's claim to fame is that he can bounce across bodies of water. Again, with the bodies of water, give it a rest already, Rare. We get it, you like water. Jeez. This ability to bounce across water is only required once or twice throughout the entire playthrough, so other than that, it's just pointless because Dixie can just hover across any large body of water, avoiding any possibility of falling in. Rare also gave Kitty the ability to break floors to reveal secrets when he is thrown by Dixie, but once again, this is only required like one time throughout the entire game. So for the majority of the game, Kiddy Kong is just a worse version of Donkey Kong from the original game. His roll attack is slightly better than Dixie's ponytail swing, but that's not nearly enough to make me play him over Dixie. It's usually better to jump on enemies anyway because the spin attacks end very abruptly, leading to accidental deaths when you're not extremely careful. Long story short, play Dixie whenever you can because Kiddy Kong is not great. If only they'd given him a more impactful and useful ability. One that was so different from Dixie's that you couldn't really compare the two effectively. Once again, I'm just spitballing, but Kiddy Kong's a baby, so maybe he could throw toys to kill enemies or pull out a stroller to ride in for a short distance. Anything would have been better than the ability to bounce across 2 bodies of water and break 1 floor. But honestly, on an even larger scale, I'm just not the biggest fan of Kiddy Kong's overall design. His feety pajamas look weird to me, he makes the most annoying sound ever when he dies. His abilities are F tier, and he's just a reskin of Donkey Kong. Rare should have made a completely new character for the 3rd game in my opinion, or at least let you play as a recurring character who would be inherently different when compared to Dixie like Funky Kong or Cranky Kong. I'm sorry to all the Kiddy Kong fans out there, but I just don't like him. Dixie's cool though. And while we're on the topic of playable characters, I should probably mention very briefly that the animal friends do make a return appearance in Donkey Kong Country 3. They function in the same way as the first 2 games, either jump into a barrel and become an animal, or open a box to work alongside one. They each have different abilities like Kitty and Dixie, and help to make the game even more unique. The one issue I have with the animal friends though, is that while they do bring a lot of variety to the game, we only got 2 new friends in Donkey Kong Country 3, Ellie the elephant and Parry the parakeet. Parry is basically ignorable though because he doesn't have a level to himself, and he'd basically be the same as Squawks if he did. They did add in a recolor of Squawks as well, but once again that didn't really add anything major to the game. I like the animal friends, they're fun to play and they bring variety to the experience, but I would have liked them a lot more if we got a few more new members for the team. But alright, I think that's enough negative talk for now. Let's move on to what, in my opinion, is the best part of any Donkey Kong Country game, and the reason I actually love this game despite the faults I just laid out. You guessed it, it's the level design. In my opinion, platformers, specifically 2D platformers, very often get caught up in the idea that a platformer is all about getting from point A to point B. And while that is at the core of what makes a platformer, focusing on that philosophy too strictly can rob a game of its originality. So many 2D platformers, new and old, make the game solely or mostly about getting through a basic obstacle course by platforming. They don't even try to innovate or mix things up, because I guess they think that would move the game further away from what a platformer is, but that's just not true at all in my opinion. And Donkey Kong Country 3 is a perfect example of this. Every level was so different in concept to the last that I almost felt like I was playing a completely different game every time I entered a new level. One level you're riding a sled down a mountain jumping over gaps to stay alive, while the next you're throwing barrels at rats running on hamster wheels to open a sealed door. Later you're timing your jumps just right to get a ghostly barrel to shoot you out in the right direction, and even later still you're flying through trees as a parrot avoiding dive-bombing woodpeckers and wasps with buzzsaws for butts. These levels may sound like they come from a number of different games, but they can all be found in Donkey Kong Country 3. If you know me, you know I value variety in games very highly. Nothing makes you stop playing quicker than getting bored while playing a video game. Games are meant to be fun from start to finish, and variety is key in making that a reality. That's something that I believe Rare understood better than any other gaming company at the time. While it is true that I would rather die than play the lightning level or the underwater level with reverse controls again, I do appreciate the variety and difficulty they brought to the game. Difficulty. Now, there's something else we should talk about. If you're coming into Donkey Kong Country 3 expecting to just sit back and fly through each level, you should probably go and play something else because this game is not for someone who's averse to dying. In fact, in my opinion, the game is built around the idea that you will be dying quite a lot. Many of the levels and bosses, especially the later ones, require a certain degree of trial and error to actually get right. It's very hard to just jump into a level of Donkey Kong Country 3 and clear it with no problem on the first try. but that's okay. In my opinion, that process of learning the levels and bosses and getting better at defeating them is one of the most fun and satisfying things about the Donkey Kong Country series and platformers as a whole. You can feel and see yourself getting better and better at the game as you play, and that's always something really cool to experience, at least for me. However, there is one aspect of Donkey Kong Country 3's difficulty that I am not so fond of, and that is the life system. You start the game with 5 lives and can accrue more by collecting bananas and balloons throughout each level, but if you run out of lives, you get a game over and have to start over from where you last saved. Save points in this game come in the form of Wrinkly Kong's save caves, which I do like in and of themselves. Every time you enter one, Wrinkly will be doing something different, like playing her N64 with fake Mario 64 music playing, doing aerobics, or sleeping. It's, once again, a very charming aspect of the game. However, the process of getting booted out to the title screen every time you game over and having to re-enter the game is anything but charming. You can save your progress anytime you're in the overworld, so that's not the issue. It's just the annoyance of having to restart the game over and over again. This is where the trial and error-like approach that you'll probably have to take to this game actually clashes with the game design quite a bit. At least in my experience, I wanted to systematically get better at each individual level and progress through trial and error and actual learning, but it felt like the game didn't want me to do that. It either wanted me to farm lives at Swanky Kong's pointless sideshow or beat every level in one try, which is basically impossible. It's not the biggest deal in the world once or twice, but having to reload the game every single time you run out of lives got super annoying really fast. I get that the game was made in a time where lives were king, but Rare was known for innovation in so many other aspects of gaming that I don't think it's appropriate to let them off the hook with that reasoning alone. This is probably a good time to mention that, like with Donkey Kong Country 2, I went for maximum completion of Donkey Kong Country 3. In this case, that's 103%. In order to achieve this, you have to find every DK coin, find and win every bonus coin, save every banana bird, and of course beat every level and boss. It's pretty important, so let's go through how each of these collectibles work in Donkey Kong Country 3. First, and easiest in my opinion, are the DK coins. In previous games, they were just hidden away in each level, but in DKC3 they are not only hidden, but also held captive by enemies known as coins. That's coin with a K, of course. These enemies use the DK coins as shields, and will repel any attack that hits them from the side of their body that is holding the coin. Their one weakness is that they follow the player wherever they go, so that leaves their backs open to ricochet attacks with barrels that can usually be found rather close by. Collecting all the DK coins will unlock the gyrocopter vehicle from Funky Kong that is much faster and easier to use than other vehicles. Next, we have the banana birds that can be found only on the Overworld map in hidden caves. Finding some of these caves requires the help of the Brothers Bear, a new group of NPCs that strongly resemble a certain famous bear also created by Rare. I honestly love these guys. Their designs are all so fun and interesting, talk to them is always a hoot, and even though they play a pretty minor role in the game, they were extremely memorable to me personally. But anyway, once you find a hidden cave, you have to play a game of Simon to save the bird, and that's it. The birds gather at Wrinkly's cave once you find them, which I found really cute. Collect all 13 birds and you'll unlock the true ending to the game, but you'll have to play it to see it for yourself. The final and arguably most important collectible are the bonus coins. You get these from finding the 2 bonus barrels in a given level and completing the bonus minigame that barrel tasks you with completing. These minigames range from things like collecting a bunch of stars to defeating a bunch of enemies. You don't lose a life for failing them, and you can try as many times as you like, which is very nice if you ask me. Bonus games are a staple of the Donkey Kong Country series, and I personally really like them because they just add even more fun and variety on top of the mountain of variety that is the base game. It's a challenge to find every bonus barrel, but it's a challenge worth attempting in my opinion. But in addition to these main collectibles, we also have silver coins that can be used to buy exactly 2 items or play Swanky Kong's minigames to win more silver coins. They're pointless. Rare could have completely removed them from the game and no one would have cared. I had 99 coins for the majority of my playthrough, which means I literally couldn't even pick up any more, which made them actually pointless to me. But I guess they're not bothering anyone. If you just ignore them, it's basically like they're not there anyway, so I guess who cares at the end of the day? They are pointless though. But let's talk about a couple of things that aren't pointless, the bosses and enemies. Let's start with the basic enemies. One complaint that I had with earlier entries in the Donkey Kong Country series was the abundance of recolors for some of the main enemies. Well, I'm happy to say that was not a problem whatsoever in this entry in the series. There's so many different and unique enemy models, and it makes the game much more interesting to play. You always gotta be on your toes because there's no way to anticipate what a new enemy will do to trip you up. If the enemy was just a recolor of a different enemy, you'd have a general idea of what they do, but this way you're always having to adapt and think, and that's a great strength to the fun of any game. There are of course a few recolors here and there, but it's nothing like the original game. Also, the new enemy designs are all super nice. I know I always praise Rare for their designs, but with uniqueness and variety like this, I don't think you can blame me. Another issue I had with the previous titles was that the bosses were very often just larger versions of basic enemies with very rudimentary mechanics. But once again, Donkey Kong Country 3 fixed those issues in my opinion. Every boss has a completely unique model and an actual sequence of interesting and sometimes challenging mechanics. But by far the most unique of all the bosses and my personal favorite was the Snowman guy. I was in no way expecting a third-person shooter-like snowball fight in a Donkey Kong Country game, but it was a very welcome surprise. Not only was the fight decently challenging, it was also undeniably unique in how it worked, and most important of all, it was actually a lot of fun. And the same can be said for pretty much every boss fight in Donkey Kong Country 3. Of course, that includes the final boss fight against the mysterious Baron K. Rulenstein. He bears an uncanny resemblance to Captain K. Rool from Donkey Kong Country 2 and King K. Rool from Donkey Kong Country, but I'm sure that's just a simple coincidence. Also, you actually have to fight K. Rulenstein twice, once at the end of the main game and once after collecting all the bonus coins. The first fight is by far the better fight in my opinion. Not only was it much more varied, but it was also just pretty tough to beat, but the same cannot be said for the final encounter. You just throw a bunch of barrels at him while dodging very basic attacks. It was honestly pretty disappointing, but I did enjoy the spectacle of the fight. And now we come to our final topic, the music of Donkey Kong Country 3. Now you might be thinking, Ak just saved the music for last because he loves game music, and while that is true, I actually have another reason this time around in addition to that. At the time of release, one of the things that was widely considered by critics to be a negative point of Donkey Kong Country 3 was in fact its music. Some stated that it lacked the flair of the first two games and that longtime fans wouldn't enjoy it, while others said it too closely resembled that of earlier games. Of course, there were people that enjoyed the music as well, but the majority seemed to think otherwise. Well, in my opinion, these guys have no idea what they're talking about because the Donkey Kong Country 3 soundtrack is super catchy and just as upbeat and fun as the original two games. I just listened to the entire soundtrack, and I can say with confidence that Donkey Kong Country 3 deserves to stand shoulder to shoulder with any great Rare game when it comes to music. If you don't agree with me, well, that's fine because you're entitled to your opinion, but I still won't change my mind on this one, and you can count on that. Donkey Kong Country 3 is a perfect example of Rare's ability to innovate and to make a game truly special. The level design for each level is just so unique. Even though this is the third game in the series, the enemies and bosses were a treat to contend with. The soundtrack is great, and the game as a whole is just super charming. However, as you no doubt understand by now, there were also a decent amount of negatives here in my opinion. Kiddy Kong was a missed opportunity and ended up taking a backseat to Dixie for the majority of the game. There's just so many lakes. The final boss fight was a bit disappointing, and the story can only be found in the manual. But despite its many downsides, if you asked me if I enjoyed my time with Donkey Kong Country 3, I would no doubt have to say, yes I did. The core of the experience, that is, the gameplay and the level design, was just such a huge home run that it makes up for the faults of the game and then some in my opinion. You'll no doubt have a good time if you choose to play this game, and I would 100% recommend that you do. As I said before, it is available on the SNES, the Game Boy Advance, the Wii, the Wii U, and the Nintendo Switch, so you can't tell me you don't have access to it. If you've never played it before, give it a try, you won't be sorry. Okay, judging by the minuscule size of the scroll bar on the side of my iPhone right now, this is going to be a long one, so if you made it this far, thank you so much, it really means a lot. If you did enjoy today's review, consider giving it a like. It's always greatly appreciated and helps me out a ton. And if you want to see more content like this in the future, consider subscribing as well. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and I'll see you in the next one. Back out. Seriously though, who is this Baron K. Rulenstein guy? He looks exactly like King K. Rool and Captain K. Rool, but he's got a different name. I guess only Rare knows the truth to that mystery. It's him. They're all the same guy.